The Grey Knights came into being during humanity's darkest hour, when the Imperium tore itself apart in civil war, and the very fabric of reality threatened to collapse under the weight of chaos. Their creation was not a response to the Horus heresy, but rather a calculated preparation for the eternal war that would follow, conceived by two of the most powerful beings in human history, the Emperor of Mankind and his closest confidant, Malcador the Sigillite. While the legions Astartes clashed across the galaxy and Terra itself burned under siege, Malcador worked in absolute secrecy to forge a weapon that would endure long after the traitors were defeated or driven into the Eye of Terror. The foundation of what would become the Grey Knights began with conversations between the Emperor and Malcador as the heresy unfolded. The Emperor, even while coordinating the defense of Terra and battling in the Webway, understood that the demonic incursions plaguing the Imperium would not cease with Horus's defeat. The Chaos Gods had revealed themselves fully, and their servants would forever seek to corrupt and destroy humanity. Standard Space Marines, for all their prowess, had proven catastrophically vulnerable to demonic corruption. Entire legions had fallen, their gene fathers turned traitor, their warriors twisted into mockeries of what they once were. The Emperor needed warriors who could face the denizens of the warp without any possibility of corruption, who possessed not just physical might, but psychic fortitude sufficient to withstand the reality-warping powers of the Neverborn. Malcador took on the monumental task of identifying and recruiting the founding members of this new chamber. The selection process was conducted with such secrecy that even the Primarchs who remained loyal were kept ignorant of its existence. Malcador sought out 8 specific Space Marines, each chosen not merely for their combat abilities, but for their incorruptible nature, their psychic potential, and their understanding of the true nature of chaos. These 8 would become the first Grand Masters, the foundation upon which the entire Grey Knights chapter would be built. The identities of most of these warriors remain shrouded in mystery, even within the chapter's own records, their names expunged or hidden behind layers of psychic encryption and redacted texts. What is known suggests that these 8 came from diverse origins. Some were drawn from the Loyalist legions, warriors who had already proven themselves against demonic threats during the heresy. Others came from more controversial sources, including Astartes, who had originally served in the traitor legions, but had remained steadfast in their loyalty to the Emperor. These loyalists from traitor legions represented the most dangerous gamble in Malcador's recruitment, as their very existence was a closely guarded secret. They had witnessed firsthand the corruption of their brother warriors and the fall of their Primarchs, giving them unique insight into how chaos operated and how it could be resisted. Their recruitment was handled with extreme caution, and their past allegiances were buried so thoroughly that no record would connect them to their former legions. The selection criteria went far beyond martial skill or even loyalty. Each of the 8 had to possess latent or active psychic abilities, as the Emperor and Malcador understood that fighting demons required more than bolter and blade. They needed warriors who could perceive the warp, who could speak the true names of demons and understand the nature of the Imperium without being consumed by it. The psychic screening process was brutal, pushing candidates to their absolute limits to ensure no trace of corruption lurked within their souls. Those who failed this screening did not survive to speak of what they had witnessed. The Emperor's direct involvement in the creation of the Grey Knights extended to perhaps the most significant aspect of their nature, their gene seed. Unlike the 20 legions, which drew their genetic heritage from the Primarchs, the Grey Knights would be created from gene seed allegedly derived from the Emperor himself. This was not merely propaganda or symbolic heritage, but a fundamental difference in their biological and psychic makeup. The Emperor's gene seed carried with it an inherent resistance to chaos corruption that even Primarch gene seed could not match, as the heresy had so devastatingly proven. This genetic foundation would make the Grey Knights uniquely suited to their role, creating warriors whose very biology rejected the touch of the warp's corrupting influence. The modifications went deeper than genetics alone. The process of creating a Grey Knight involved psychic conditioning and modification that began from the moment of recruitment and continued throughout their transformation from aspirant to full battle brother. Their minds were fortified with psychic wards and mental disciplines that made them anathema to demonic possession. Every Grey Knight was a psyker, though their abilities varied in strength and manifestation. This universal psychic nature set them apart from standard chapters, where psykers formed a small, specialized minority. The training required to harness and control these abilities was grueling, taking decades longer than the creation of a standard space marine. Many aspirants died during this process, their minds burned out by the psychic awakening or their bodies rejecting the modifications. As Malkador assembled the 8 founders and established the framework for recruitment and training, the question of where to base this new chapter became paramount. The Grey Knights could not operate from Terra itself, as their very existence needed to remain hidden from all but the highest levels of imperial authority. They required a fortress monastery that could be concealed from both physical observation and psychic detection, a place where they could train and prepare for missions that might not occur for years or decades. Malkador chose Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, as the site for this hidden fortress. Titan's selection was not arbitrary. The moon already possessed certain properties that made it suitable for concealment, and its location in the Sol system meant it remained under the direct protection of Terra's defenses, while being distant enough to maintain operational security. The construction of the fortress monastery on Titan involved technologies and techniques that bordered on the arcane, drawing upon the Emperor's own knowledge of science and sorcery. Psychic wards of immense power were woven into the very structure of the fortress, creating layers of protection that would hide it from scrying, from warp-based detection, and from conventional sensors. These wards were maintained by specially trained Grey Knights and required constant reinforcement, as any lapse could expose the chapter's existence to enemies both material and immaterial. The most extraordinary measure taken to protect Titan occurred during the final stages of the Horus Heresy itself. As the War Master's forces closed on Terra and demonic incursions threatened to overwhelm the Sol system, the decision was made to temporarily displace Titan into the warp. This was not teleportation or conventional warp travel, but rather a complete phase shift that removed the moon from real space entirely. The entire population of Titan, including the nascent Grey Knights and their support personnel, was transported into the Imperium, hidden within a pocket of reality that existed outside normal space and time. The psychic effort required to accomplish this feat and maintain it was staggering, drawing upon reserves of power that only the Emperor and Malkador together could muster while the heresy raged. Titan remained displaced throughout the siege of Terra, its inhabitants experiencing time differently than those who fought and died in real space. When the moon finally returned after Horus's defeat, those aboard discovered that while months had passed for them, the war had ended and the Imperium had been forever changed. This displacement served multiple purposes beyond mere protection. It allowed the Grey Knights to complete their initial training and organization without interruption, and it demonstrated the extraordinary lengths to which the Emperor and Malkador would go to ensure their survival. The return of Titan was carefully coordinated to coincide with the formal establishment of the Inquisition and the reorganization of imperial military forces in the aftermath of the heresy. The Grey Knights' role as the chamber militant of the Ordo Malleus was defined from their inception, though the Inquisition itself would not be formally established until after the Emperor's internment in the Golden Throne. The relationship between the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus was symbiotic, but not subservient. While Grey Knights would respond to requests from Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus and work alongside them in hunting demonic threats, the chapter maintained its own command structure and operational independence. Grand Masters answered to no authority save the Emperor himself, though in practice they coordinated closely with the Inquisition's highest ranks. This arrangement allowed the Grey Knights to pursue demonic threats wherever they emerged while benefiting from the Inquisition's vast intelligence network and authority to requisition resources from across the Imperium. The secrecy surrounding the Grey Knights' existence was absolute in the early years following the heresy. Most Imperial citizens, and even most Space Marines, had no knowledge that such a chapter existed. Records of their interventions were scrubbed, witnesses were mind wiped or eliminated, and entire battlefields were sterilized to remove evidence of demonic incursions and the Grey Knights who fought them. This policy of absolute secrecy stemmed from the understanding that knowledge of chaos was itself corrupting, and that the existence of a chapter specifically designed to fight demons would inevitably raise questions that could lead the curious toward damnation. The process of creating a Grey Knight begins not with willing volunteers or planetary tithes, but with a search across the entire Imperium for individuals who possess qualities so rare that entire worlds might produce only one suitable candidate in a generation. Unlike standard Space Marine chapters that recruit from specific homeworlds or regions, the Grey Knights draw their aspirants from wherever the Inquisition's black ships discover them. These massive vessels traverse the galaxy collecting psychers, those individuals cursed and blessed with the ability to touch the warp. Most psychers collected by the black ships face one of three fates. They are brought to Terra to fuel the Astronomicon, they are trained as sanctioned psychers to serve the Imperium in various capacities, or they are executed as too dangerous to live. A minuscule fraction, however, possess characteristics that mark them as potential Grey Knights. The initial identification occurs during the standard psychic screening conducted aboard the black ships. Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus maintain permanent observers within the black ship's operations, watching for specific markers that indicate suitability for Grey Knights recruitment. These markers go far beyond simple psychic strength or control. The observers look for resilience against demonic whispers, an innate resistance to corruption that manifests even before any formal training begins. They search for individuals whose psychic presence burns with a particular clarity, whose souls shine with what can only be described as an inner purity that remains untainted despite exposure to the warp's influence. Age is a factor, as the physical transformation into an Astartes requires candidates young enough for their bodies to accept the gene seed implantation, typically between 6 and 10 standard years old. The psychological profile matters just as much, as the candidate must demonstrate not just courage, but a fundamental incorruptibility that no amount of training can instill if it is not already present. When a potential candidate is identified, they are separated from the other psychers with such discretion that even the black ship's crew remains unaware of what has occurred. The child is transferred to inquisitorial custody and transported to Titan under conditions of absolute secrecy. Many candidates die during the initial journey, their minds unable to withstand the psychic isolation protocols necessary to prevent any trace of their existence from being detected by entities in the warp. Those who survive the journey face an evaluation process that makes the black ship's screening seem gentle by comparison. The evaluation takes place within specially prepared chambers deep within Titan's fortress monastery, rooms inscribed with wards and protections that have been maintained since the chapter's founding. Here, senior Grey Knights and prognosticars subject each candidate to tests that push their psychic abilities to absolute limits, while simultaneously probing for any weakness, any hairline fracture in their mental defenses that might later widen into corruption. The testing involves direct exposure to controlled demonic presence. Candidates are brought into proximity with bound demons, lesser entities trapped within psychic prisons, and their reactions are observed with merciless precision. A candidate who shows fear is not automatically rejected, as fear is a rational response to the denizens of the warp. What matters is whether that fear leads to despair, whether it creates openings through which corruption might enter. The examiners watch for hesitation, for the moment when a candidate might consider bargaining or seeking power from the entities before them. They observe how the candidate's psychic presence interacts with the demons, whether their soul recoils in righteous rejection or shows even the slightest attraction to the forbidden knowledge and power the demon represents. Most candidates fail this test. Those who fail are not returned to the black ships, but are instead given the Emperor's peace, their bodies cremated, and their ashes scattered in Titan's training grounds. The Grey Knights cannot risk any individual who has been exposed to their secrets and their methods surviving outside the chapter's control. Those rare individuals who pass every test begin their transformation into Grey Knights. The process shares certain elements with standard Astartes creation, but diverges in fundamental ways that reflect the unique nature and purpose of the chapter. The gene seed implantation follows a sequence similar to other chapters, with the candidate receiving the 19 specialized organs that will transform their human body into that of a space marine. The secondary heart, the os medulla that reinforces their skeleton, the biscopia that builds massive muscle tissue, the hemastamen that transforms their blood, the Lehramann's organ that enables rapid clotting, the catalepsian node that allows them to remain conscious while portions of their brain rest, the preomner that detoxifies ingested materials, the omophagia that allows them to absorb genetic memory through consumption, the multi-lung that functions in hostile atmospheres, the oculobe that enhances vision, the Lyman's ear that filters sound and maintains balance, the Susin membrane that enables suspended animation, the melanochrome that protects against radiation, the oolitic kidney that filters toxins, the neuroglottis that allows them to taste chemical signatures, the mucranoid that seals their skin against environmental hazards, the Becher's gland that allows them to spit acid, the progenitor glands that will grow new gene seed, and the black carapace that interfaces with their armor. The gene seed itself, however, carries properties that distinguish Grey Knights from all other Astartes. Derived from the Emperor's own genetic template rather than from any Primarch, this gene seed contains inherent protections against chaos corruption woven into its fundamental structure. The implantation process is longer and more dangerous than standard Astartes creation, with a mortality rate that would be considered catastrophic in any other chapter. Nearly half of all candidates die during gene seed implantation, their bodies rejecting the Emperor's genetic legacy or their physiology unable to withstand the transformation. Those who survive find their bodies changing in ways that go beyond the standard Astartes modifications. Their psychic abilities, already present before implantation, begin to manifest more strongly as the gene seed activates latent portions of their brain and nervous system. This psychic awakening is carefully monitored and controlled, as an uncontrolled manifestation could kill the aspirant or worse, create a breach through which demonic entities might enter real space. The psychic awakening occurs in stages coordinated with the physical transformation. As each gene seed organ takes hold and begins functioning, specially trained librarians guide the aspirant through mental exercises and disciplines designed to channel and focus their emerging abilities. The aspirant learns to perceive the warp without being overwhelmed by it, to see the currents and eddies of psychic energy that underlie reality without losing their grip on the material world. They practice forming mental barriers, constructing defenses within their own minds that will protect them from demonic assault and possession. These barriers are not simple walls, but complex architectures of thought and will, layered protections that can absorb and deflect psychic attacks while maintaining the aspirant's ability to use their own powers offensively. Concurrent with the physical and psychic transformation, the aspirants undergo the 666 rituals of detestation. These rituals form the core of the Grey Knight's mental conditioning, a program of psycho-indoctrination that goes far beyond anything inflicted on standard space marines. Each ritual focuses on a specific aspect of chaos, a particular demon type, or a method of corruption that the aspirant must learn to recognize and resist. The rituals involve hypno-indoctrination, but not the simple implantation of knowledge and reflexes used in other chapters. Instead, the aspirant's mind is carefully reshaped, their thought patterns altered to make certain concepts literally unthinkable. The idea of serving chaos, of accepting demonic power, of bargaining with the entities of the warp, becomes not just morally repugnant, but psychologically impossible. The conditioning creates mental structures that trigger immediate, violent rejection of any attempt at corruption, turning the aspirant's own mind into a weapon against chaos influence. The rituals take years to complete, with each one building upon the foundations laid by those before it. Early rituals focus on basic concepts, teaching the aspirant to recognize the touch of chaos in its most obvious forms. Later rituals delve into subtlety, training the aspirant to detect corruption that hides behind masks of righteousness or that approaches through seemingly innocent paths. The aspirant learns the 1,000 names of the ruinous powers, not to invoke them, but to understand how they operate and what they offer to those they seek to corrupt. They study the methods by which demons infiltrate human societies, the ways in which chaos cults begin with simple dissatisfaction and grow into full-fledged worship. They examine historical cases of corruption, learning from the falls of others so that they might avoid similar fates. The most intense rituals involve direct psychic contact with bound demons under carefully controlled conditions. The aspirant is brought before imprisoned entities and forced to withstand their attempts at corruption, their offers of power, their threats, and their temptations. Senior Grey Knights monitor these sessions constantly, ready to intervene if the demon gains any foothold in the aspirant's mind. The aspirant must not only resist, but must actively reject what the demon offers, must feel genuine hatred and revulsion rather than simply maintaining mental discipline. This emotional component is crucial, as mere intellectual rejection of chaos is not sufficient. The aspirant's entire being, conscious and unconscious, rational and emotional, must be aligned in absolute opposition to the ruinous powers. Between the rituals, aspirants train in combat techniques specific to fighting demonic entities. They learn to wield force weapons, psychically attuned blades and hammers that can harm beings of pure warp energy. The training involves not just physical technique but psychic focus, as the weapon's effectiveness depends on the wielder's ability to channel their power through it. Aspirants practice the precise mental state required to activate and maintain a force weapon's field, learning to sustain that state even while under physical and psychic assault. They drill in the use of storm bolters, the Grey Knight's preferred ranged weapon, learning to load and fire while maintaining their psychic defenses and reciting prayers of banishment. The combat training emphasizes teamwork and coordination, as Grey Knights typically operate in squads where each member's psychic presence reinforces the others, creating a combined field of protection and power greater than any individual could generate. The implantation of knowledge from the Liber Daemonica represents perhaps the most dangerous phase of an aspirant's transformation. The Liber Daemonica is the Grey Knight's accumulated wisdom regarding demons, a repository of information gathered over 10,000 years of warfare against the denizens of the warp. It contains the true names of countless demon entities, detailed descriptions of their capabilities and weaknesses, rituals of banishment, and methods of sealing breaches between real space and the Imperium. This knowledge is not recorded in books or data files that could be stolen or corrupted. Instead, it exists as psychic engrams, patterns of information encoded directly into the minds of Grey Knights through a process that combines psychic imprinting with hypno-indoctrination. The transfer of Liber Daemonica knowledge occurs in stages throughout the aspirant's training. Early transfers provide basic information, foundational knowledge that every Grey Knight must possess. As the aspirant progresses and demonstrates their ability to contain and process this dangerous information without corruption, they receive deeper knowledge, more specific details about particular demon types and greater entities. The process is agonizing, as the information being transferred carries with it psychic weight and emotional resonance. Learning a demon's true name means experiencing, in some small way, the essence of that entity. The aspirant's mind must be strong enough to contain this knowledge without being changed by it, to know the demon without becoming like the demon. Senior Grey Knights who oversee this process watch for any sign that the knowledge is overwhelming the aspirant or creating psychological damage. The human mind, even one enhanced by gene seed and psycho-conditioning, has limits to what it can contain. Some aspirants reach their capacity and can absorb no more knowledge from the Liber Daemonica. These individuals still become full Grey Knights, but they will never advance to the highest ranks where the most dangerous and comprehensive knowledge is required. Others demonstrate seemingly limitless capacity, their minds able to contain and organize vast quantities of information about demonic hierarchies, warp topology, and banishment techniques. These aspirants are marked for eventual advancement to positions of greater responsibility within the chapter. The physical training continues throughout all of these processes, as the aspirant's body grows and changes under the influence of the gene seed. They spend hours each day in the training halls, their enhanced muscles and reflexes being pushed to their limits and beyond. They learn to fight in the specialized Aegis pattern Terminator armor that many Grey Knights wear, becoming accustomed to the weight and the slight delay in movement that the heavy armor imposes. They practice boarding actions and close quarters combat, as many demonic incursions occur in confined spaces like starship corridors or underhive tunnels. They train in zero gravity, in toxic atmospheres, in environments that would kill unaugmented humans instantly, learning to fight effectively regardless of conditions. The transformation from aspirant to full battle brother takes decades, far longer than the creation of a standard space marine. A typical Astartes might complete their training and receive their power armor within 5 to 10 years of recruitment. A Grey Knight aspirant requires 20 to 30 years before they are considered ready for combat deployment. This extended timeline reflects the vastly greater complexity of what they must learn and become. They are not simply warriors, but psychic bulwarks against chaos, walking weapons designed to fight enemies that can corrupt through mere proximity. Every aspect of their being, physical and mental, must be honed to perfection before they can be trusted to face the horrors that lurk in the warp. When an aspirant finally completes the 666 rituals of detestation, survives the full gene seed implantation, demonstrates mastery of their psychic abilities, and absorbs sufficient knowledge from the Liber Daemonica, they undergo a final trial. This trial varies based on the aspirant's specific abilities and the needs of the chapter, but it always involves facing a genuine demonic threat under controlled conditions. The aspirant must demonstrate that all their training has truly taken hold, that they can apply their knowledge and abilities in actual combat against the forces of chaos. Senior Grey Knights observe, but do not intervene unless the aspirant is in danger of death or possession. The aspirant must prove themselves capable of surviving and prevailing through their own strength and skill. Those who succeed in this final trial are inducted into the Grey Knights as full battle brothers. They receive their psychically attuned armor, inscribed with wards and prayers that have been maintained since the chapter's founding. They are issued their weapons, force sword or halberd and storm bolter, each one a relic that has served previous Grey Knights and been reconsecrated for its new bearer. They take their oaths, swearing to stand forever against chaos, to hunt demons wherever they manifest, to accept no corruption and offer no mercy to the entities of the warp. These oaths are not mere words but psychic bonds, promises that become part of the Grey Knight's fundamental nature and that will guide their actions for the rest of their existence. The moment a Grey Knight dons his armor for the first time marks the culmination of decades of preparation, but it also represents the beginning of a relationship with wargear that transcends the bond between standard space marines and their equipment. Every piece of equipment carried by a Grey Knight serves as both weapon and ward, crafted through processes that combine the Adeptus Mechanicus's most sacred technologies with rituals of psychic consecration that date back to the chapter's founding. The armor, weapons, and specialized equipment used by the Grey Knights are not merely tools of war, but extensions of their bearer's will, channels through which psychic power flows to smite the demonic. Aegis Pattern Terminator armor represents the pinnacle of protection available to Grey Knights who have proven themselves worthy through centuries of service. Unlike standard tactical dreadnought armor worn by other chapters' veteran warriors, Aegis suits incorporate modifications and enhancements specifically designed to combat entities of the warp. The armor's ceramite plates are forged using techniques that involve more than simple metallurgy. Each plate undergoes blessing by the chapter's chaplains during its creation, prayers of warding inscribed into the molecular structure of the material itself through a process that combines traditional metalworking with psychic manipulation. The ceramite is mixed with sanctified materials including blessed silver, fragments of stone from Terra's holiest sites, and trace amounts of the Emperor's own blood, preserved since the chapter's founding and used sparingly in the most critical applications. The most distinctive feature of Aegis armor lies in the hexagrammic wards etched across every surface. These wards are not decorative but functional, each one a carefully calculated psychic barrier designed to deflect specific forms of demonic attack. The hexagrams follow patterns derived from the Emperor's own understanding of warp mathematics, geometric configurations that create resonances fundamentally opposed to the nature of chaos. A demon attempting to strike a Grey Knight in Aegis armor finds its attacks sliding away from these wards, its power dissipating against barriers that exist partially in the material realm and partially in the warp itself. The wards must be maintained constantly, as the mere presence of demonic entities causes them to degrade over time. After each engagement, Tech Marines inspect every ward, reinscribing those that have been damaged and reinforcing those that show signs of weakening. Beneath the outer ceramic plates, Aegis armor contains layers of psychically conductive circuitry that serve multiple purposes. This circuitry channels the wearer's psychic energy throughout the armor, creating a field that extends beyond the physical boundaries of the suit itself. When multiple Grey Knights in Aegis armor stand together, their individual fields overlap and reinforce each other, generating a combined barrier that can protect against attacks that would overwhelm any single warrior. The circuitry also feeds power to the force weapon the Grey Knight carries, creating a direct connection between the warrior's mind and his blade or hammer. This connection allows for faster activation of the weapon's psychic field and more efficient use of the wielder's mental energy during prolonged combat. The helmet of Aegis armor deserves particular attention, as it protects the most vulnerable and most important part of any Grey Knight. The eye lenses are crafted from crystals grown in special chambers aboard Titan, exposed to controlled psychic emanations throughout their formation. These crystals allow the wearer to perceive entities and phenomena that exist primarily in the warp, seeing demons in their true forms rather than whatever shape they choose to present to unaugmented vision. The helmet's interior contains additional wards focused specifically on protecting the wearer's mind, creating a secondary layer of defense against psychic attacks that attempt to bypass physical armor entirely. Vox systems built into the helmet are shielded against demonic interference, ensuring that Grey Knights can coordinate their actions even when fighting in areas where reality itself becomes unstable. Nemesis force weapons form the primary close combat armament of every Grey Knight, and each weapon type serves specific tactical purposes while sharing fundamental characteristics. All Nemesis weapons contain psychically reactive materials in their construction, primarily a substance known as sanctified silver that has been blessed through rituals lasting months. The silver is alloyed with adamantium to provide physical strength, but it is the psychic properties of the sanctified silver that make these weapons truly deadly to demons. When a Grey Knight channels his power through a Nemesis weapon, the blade or striking surface becomes wreathed in energy that exists simultaneously in real space and the warp. This dual nature field allows the weapon to harm entities of pure warp energy, cutting through demonic essence as easily as it cleaves through physical armor. The Nemesis Force Sword represents the most common variant, a weapon balanced for both offense and defense. The blade typically measures between 90 and 100 centimeters in length, designed to be wielded one-handed, while the other hand operates a storm bolter or makes gestures necessary for certain psychic techniques. The sword's edge never dulls through normal use, maintained by the psychic field that surrounds it even when not actively powered. Grey Knights train extensively in swordsmanship, learning techniques that combine physical blade work with psychic strikes. A skilled Grey Knight can use his force sword to parry not just physical attacks but psychic assaults, the blade's field disrupting hostile energies before they reach the wielder. Nemesis force halberds extend the wielder's reach, their longer shafts allowing Grey Knights to engage enemies while maintaining distance. The halberd's blade sits atop a shaft reinforced with the same materials used in the armor's construction, creating a weapon that can be used both for stabbing attacks and for sweeping strikes that can affect multiple enemies. The extended reach proves particularly valuable when fighting larger demon entities, allowing the Grey Knight to strike at vital points while staying outside the range of claws and tentacles. The halberd's balance differs from the sword, requiring different training and muscle memory, which is why Grey Knights typically specialize in one weapon type rather than switching between them regularly. Nemesis demon hammers sacrifice speed and finesse for raw destructive power. These massive weapons require both hands to wield effectively, their heads weighing several kilograms even before accounting for the psychic energy channeled through them. When a demon hammer strikes, it releases a burst of psychic force that can stagger even greater demons, disrupting the warp energy that holds their physical manifestation together. The hammer proves most effective against heavily armored demon entities, or when fighting in confined spaces where the weapon's devastating impact can affect multiple enemies with each blow. Only Grey Knights with exceptional physical strength and psychic power typically carry demon hammers, as the weapon demands tremendous reserves of both to use effectively in prolonged combat. Nemesis Force Falchions come in matched pairs, shorter blades designed for aggressive close-quarters fighting. Warriors who favor falchions train in a combat style that emphasizes speed and overwhelming offense, their paired blades creating a whirlwind of psychically charged strikes that can dismember lesser demons in seconds. The falchion's shorter length allows for faster attacks than longer weapons permit, and the dual-wielding style enables the Grey Knight to maintain pressure on enemies without pause. However, fighting with two weapons simultaneously requires dividing one's psychic focus between them, making falchions more demanding mentally than single weapon styles. Nemesis Force Greatswords represent rare weapons typically carried only by veteran warriors or those holding specific positions within the chapter's hierarchy. These massive two-handed blades stretch to lengths exceeding 150 centimeters, requiring tremendous strength to wield, but capable of cleaving through multiple enemies with single strikes. The greatsword's size allows for larger psychic matrices to be incorporated into its construction, making it capable of channeling more power than smaller weapons. A Grey Knight wielding a greatsword becomes a focal point for his squad's combined psychic might, his weapon serving as a lightning rod that can be charged with energy from multiple sources and then released in devastating attacks. Regardless of type, every Nemesis weapon undergoes extensive consecration before being issued to a Grey Knight. The weapon is bathed in sanctified oils, while chaplains recite prayers of dedication, then exposed to controlled psychic energy in special chambers designed to imprint specific resonances into the weapon's structure. The process takes weeks, during which the weapon is never left unattended, as even brief exposure to corrupting influences could compromise its effectiveness. Once consecrated, the weapon is attuned to its intended bearer through a ritual that creates a psychic bond between warrior and weapon. This bond means that the weapon responds more readily to its bearer's will, and that the bearer can sense the weapon's location and condition even when not holding it. The Storm Bolter serves as the standard ranged weapon for Grey Knights, but like everything else in their arsenal, it incorporates modifications that distinguish it from weapons used by other chapters. The bolts fired by Grey Knights contain specially prepared cores that include fragments of sanctified materials. When these bolts detonate, they release not just physical shrapnel but psychic energy that disrupts warp-based entities. The Storm Bolter's dual-barrel design allows for sustained fire rates that can shred lesser demons before they close to melee range, and the weapon's compact size makes it practical to use while also wielding a Nemesis weapon. Psycannons represent heavier firepower, specialized weapons that channel the wielder's psychic energy into their ammunition before firing. A psycannon resembles a heavy bolter in basic configuration, but incorporates psychically conductive materials throughout its construction. When fired, each round passes through a chamber where the wielder's psychic power is imprinted onto it, transforming ordinary mass reactive ammunition into projectiles capable of disrupting demonic essence. The process drains the wielder's mental energy with each shot, making psycannons demanding weapons that require careful management of one's psychic reserves. However, the destructive power they bring to bear against demon entities makes this cost worthwhile. Psycannon rounds can punch through the unnatural armor that greater demons manifest around themselves, reaching the warp energy core that sustains their presence in real space. Silencers operate on different principles, generating focused beams of psychic energy that directly attack a demon's connection to the warp. Rather than destroying the demon's physical manifestation through conventional damage, a silencer weakens the bonds that hold the entity in real space, forcing it back into the Imperium. The weapon appears similar to a psycannon, but contains complex psychic matrices that shape and direct the wielder's power into specific frequencies. These frequencies resonate with the fundamental nature of demonic manifestation, creating interference patterns that disrupt the entity's ability to maintain coherent form. Against particularly powerful demons, multiple Grey Knights with silencers can coordinate their fire, their combined beams creating resonance cascades that can banish entities that would resist individual attacks. Incinerators serve a different purpose, projecting streams of sanctified promethium that burns with both physical and psychic heat. The promethium used in incinerators undergoes extensive blessing and is mixed with powdered silver and other materials that enhance its effectiveness against warp entities. When ignited, the flames burn hotter than normal promethium and adhere to demonic essence in ways that physical fire cannot. Demons caught in incinerator streams find their manifestations consumed, the psychic component of the flames eating away at the warp energy that sustains them. Incinerators prove particularly effective when clearing areas of lesser demon infestations, or when fighting in environments where the concentrated firepower of psy-cannons might cause unacceptable collateral damage. The ammunition and specialized equipment used by Grey Knights require constant preparation and maintenance. The chapter maintains dedicated facilities on Titan where Techmarines and Purifiers work in shifts that never cease, producing the sanctified materials needed for ongoing operations. Storm Bolter ammunition is blessed in batches, each bolt receiving prayers of dedication before being loaded into magazines. The process cannot be rushed, as insufficient consecration reduces the ammunition's effectiveness against demonic targets. Psy-cannon rounds require even more extensive preparation, their cores carefully machined to accept psychic imprinting, and their casings inscribed with microscopic wards. Sanctified oils used to anoint armor and weapons are prepared from recipes that date back to the chapter's founding. These oils contain extracts from plants grown in Titan's hydroponics facilities under carefully controlled conditions, mixed with blessed water from Terra and trace amounts of other materials, whose exact composition remains known only to the chapter's highest ranks. The oils serve multiple purposes beyond simple maintenance, creating thin layers on armor and weapon surfaces that resist corruption and provide additional protection against warp-based attacks. After each mission, Grey Knights ritually clean and re-anoint their equipment, a process that serves both practical and spiritual purposes. Blessed salts find use in establishing perimeters and creating barriers that demons find difficult to cross. These salts are harvested from specific locations on Terra and other holy worlds, then consecrated through rituals performed by the chapter's chaplains. When spread in specific patterns and activated through prayer and psychic focus, the salts create boundaries that resist demonic incursion. Grey Knights carry supplies of blessed salt on every mission, using it to secure areas they have cleared or to create fallback positions when facing overwhelming numbers. The salt's effectiveness depends on the strength of the demons attempting to cross it, with lesser entities finding it an absolute barrier, while greater demons can force their way through at cost to their manifestation's stability. Psychically charged ammunition represents the cutting edge of the Grey Knight's arsenal, rounds that contain not just blessed materials, but actual psychic energy bound into stable forms. Creating such ammunition requires Grey Knights with specific talents to channel their power into specially prepared matrices, a process that leaves the psyker exhausted, but produces ammunition of extraordinary effectiveness. These rounds are reserved for the most critical engagements, used when facing demon princes or greater entities that resist conventional weapons. The psychic charge within each round detonates on impact, releasing energy that attacks the target simultaneously in real space, and the warp, making defense against such attacks extremely difficult even for powerful entities. The preparation of all these materials follows protocols established during the chapter's founding and refined over 10 millennia of warfare. Nothing is left to chance, and every step of every process is documented and supervised to ensure no corruption can enter the supply chain. The Techmarines and Purifiers who perform this work understand that a single contaminated batch of ammunition or a flawed consecration ritual could cost Grey Knights their lives or worse, could provide openings through which demons might corrupt the chapter's warriors. The vigilance required never wavers, as the enemies the Grey Knights face constantly seek weaknesses to exploit, and compromised equipment could provide exactly such an opening. The Grey Knights organize themselves into 8 distinct brotherhoods, a structure established at the chapter's founding by the original 8 Grand Masters who formed its core. This division serves both practical and symbolic purposes, creating manageable combat formations, while honoring the legacy of those first warriors who stood against the demonic tide when the Imperium still reeled from the Horus Heresy's devastation. Each brotherhood maintains its own identity, tactical preferences, and battle honors accumulated over 10,000 years of warfare against entities that most Imperial citizens never know exist. The number 8 itself carries significance within the chapter, representing completeness and the unbreakable circle of duty that binds every Grey Knight to their sacred mission. Each brotherhood functions as a semi-autonomous formation capable of independent operations across the galaxy. A typical brotherhood contains approximately 100 Grey Knights at full strength, though casualties and the extended recruitment process mean that most brotherhoods operate below this ideal number at any given time. The warriors within each brotherhood develop strong bonds forged through centuries of fighting alongside the same battle brothers, creating tactical cohesion that allows them to coordinate complex psychic and physical maneuvers without extensive communication. This cohesion proves vital when facing demonic entities that can disrupt conventional communications, or when operating in environments where the warp's influence makes Vox systems unreliable. The brother captain commands each brotherhood, a position earned through demonstrated skill, unwavering faith, and typically centuries of service. A brother captain bears responsibility for every aspect of his brotherhood's operations, from tactical deployment decisions to the spiritual well-being of his warriors. He coordinates with the prognosticars to identify threats requiring his brotherhood's attention, liaises with inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus who request Grey Knight support, and ensures his warriors remain prepared for immediate deployment regardless of circumstances. The brother captain's authority within his brotherhood is absolute, though he answers to the Grand Masters who oversee the chapter's strategic direction. Each brother captain maintains his own command staff, including senior warriors who advise on tactical matters, apothecaries who monitor the brotherhood's physical and genetic health, and techmarines who ensure equipment readiness. The brotherhoods have developed distinct tactical specializations over millennia of operations, though all maintain proficiency in the full spectrum of demon hunting techniques. Some brotherhoods favor aggressive close-quarters tactics, their warriors trained extensively in the use of Nemesis force halberds and demon hammers to close rapidly with demonic entities and destroy them in brutal melee combat. These brotherhoods typically deploy in situations where demonic incursions have already manifested in force and require immediate, violent suppression before the entities can establish permanent footholds in real space. Their battle honors include dozens of instances where they have assaulted demon-held fortifications, their terminators teleporting directly into the heart of corrupted areas and fighting their way through hordes of lesser entities to reach and banish the greater demons coordinating the incursions. Other brotherhoods specialize in surgical strikes and precision operations, their warriors favoring ranged combat and coordinated psychic attacks that can neutralize specific targets without extensive collateral damage. These brotherhoods often work closely with inquisitors investigating suspected demonic activity, providing support for operations where the full extent of corruption remains unclear, and where deploying overwhelming force might destroy evidence needed to trace the source of the taint. Their expertise includes boarding actions against spacecraft suspected of carrying demonic entities, rapid insertion into urban environments where civilian populations require protection, and operations in locations where political or strategic considerations demand discretion. Several brotherhoods have earned reputations for expertise against specific demon types or chaos powers. One brotherhood has fought the Servants of Khorne so extensively that its warriors have developed specialized techniques for combating bloodthirsty entities that care nothing for self-preservation and attack with mindless fury. Another brotherhood specializes in countering the machinations of Tzeentch, their prognosticars particularly skilled at unraveling the complex plots and schemes that mark the changer of Wei's influence. These specializations develop organically over centuries as brotherhoods repeatedly deploy against similar threats, their warriors accumulating knowledge and experience that gets passed down through training and the psychic imprinting of the Liber Daemonica. The battle honors maintained by each brotherhood form living records of the chapter's endless war against chaos. These honors are not inscribed in books or recorded in data files, but are instead preserved through psychic memory and oral tradition, passed from veteran to newly inducted battle brother through ceremonies and rituals. Each brotherhood can recite the names of major demon entities its warriors have banished, describe battles fought on worlds whose names have been expunged from all other imperial records, and detail the sacrifices made by brothers who fell in service to the emperor. The honors serve both as inspiration for current warriors and as tactical intelligence, providing insights into demon behavior and capabilities that might prove crucial in future engagements. Above the brother captains stand the Grand Masters, 8 warriors who each trace their lineage back to one of the original founders. The position of Grand Master represents the pinnacle of achievement within the Grey Knights, attainable only by those who have demonstrated absolute mastery of demon hunting in all its aspects. A Grand Master must possess not just combat prowess but deep understanding of demonic hierarchies, extensive knowledge of banishment rituals, proven leadership abilities, and psychic power sufficient to face the greatest entities the warp can manifest. The selection of a new Grand Master occurs when the previous holder falls in battle or ascends to an even higher position within the chapter's hierarchy, with candidates drawn from the ranks of brother captains and other senior warriors who have distinguished themselves through exceptional service. Each Grand Master oversees strategic operations across entire sectors or segmentums, coordinating the deployments of multiple brotherhoods to address threats that require responses beyond what single formations can provide. They work directly with the highest ranks of the Ordo Malleus, sharing intelligence about demonic activity and coordinating responses to incursions that threaten multiple systems simultaneously. The Grand Masters also bear responsibility for maintaining the chapter's relationship with other imperial institutions, a delicate task given the secrecy surrounding the Grey Knights' existence and operations. They must balance the need for operational security against the practical reality that major demon incursions often require support from Imperial Guard regiments, Navy assets, or other Space Marine chapters. The Grand Masters gather in council when matters affecting the entire chapter require discussion and decision. These councils occur on Titan, in chambers deep within the fortress monastery, where wards and protections ensure absolute privacy. During these gatherings, the Grand Masters review ongoing operations, assess emerging threats identified by the prognosticars, and determine strategic priorities for the coming years or decades. The councils also address internal chapter matters, including the allocation of resources, the promotion of warriors to positions of greater responsibility, and the maintenance of the chapter's gene seed stocks. Decisions made in these councils shape the Grey Knights' activities across the entire galaxy, determining which threats receive immediate attention and which must be monitored for future action. The Supreme Grand Master holds authority over all 8 Grand Masters and serves as the Chapter Master, the ultimate commander of the Grey Knights. This position carries weight beyond simple military command, as the Supreme Grand Master embodies the chapter's purpose and serves as the living link to its founding. He coordinates directly with the highest levels of the Inquisition, including the Grand Masters of the Ordo Malleus, and his voice carries tremendous weight in discussions of imperial policy regarding demonic threats. The Supreme Grand Master must possess not just the qualities required of a Grand Master, but also the wisdom to guide the entire chapter through challenges that threaten its existence or its mission. His decisions can commit the Grey Knights to campaigns lasting decades, redirect the chapter's strategic focus, or authorize the use of the most dangerous and closely guarded knowledge contained within the Liber Daemonica. Within the broader structure of the 8 Brotherhoods exist specialized formations that serve specific purposes vital to the chapter's operations. The Purifiers represent warriors who have demonstrated exceptional resistance to corruption, even by Grey Knights' extraordinary standards. These individuals possess an inner purity so profound that demons recoil from their mere presence, their souls burning with light that causes physical pain to entities of the warp. Purifiers undergo additional rituals beyond the standard 666 rituals of detestation, their minds and souls refined through processes that push them to the absolute limits of what psychically active beings can endure. They serve as the chapter's final safeguard against corruption, deployed when facing entities whose power to corrupt exceeds normal parameters, or when investigating suspected taint within imperial institutions where even standard Grey Knights might face overwhelming temptation. The combat doctrine employed by purifiers emphasizes their unique nature, with squads often deployed as vanguard forces that clear paths through demon hordes for other Grey Knights to follow. Their psychic presence disrupts the warp energy that sustains lesser demons, causing these entities to weaken or dissipate entirely when purifiers approach. Against greater demons, purifiers serve as anchors for combined psychic attacks, their inherent purity allowing them to channel power from multiple sources without risk of corruption. The purifiers carry specialized equipment, including incinerators that project flames imbued with their own purifying essence, creating conflagrations that burn away demonic taint at fundamental levels. Paladins represent the chapter's most veteran warriors, Grey Knights who have survived centuries of combat against the demonic and emerged with skills bordering on the supernatural. These warriors have faced every major demon type, participated in campaigns against all 4 chaos powers, and accumulated knowledge that makes them invaluable resources for training and tactical planning. A paladin's experience allows him to recognize demon tactics before they fully develop, to identify weaknesses in entities that other warriors might miss, and to coordinate complex operations that require precise timing and flawless execution. Paladins often serve as advisors to brother captains and grand masters, their counsel sought when planning operations against particularly dangerous targets or when facing unfamiliar demon variants. The selection of paladins occurs through a process that evaluates not just combat achievements, but wisdom, judgment, and the warrior's ability to pass knowledge to others. A Grey Knight might serve for 500 years and participate in hundreds of battles without being elevated to paladin status if he lacks the temperament or teaching ability the position requires. Conversely, warriors who demonstrate exceptional insight and the capacity to analyze and explain their experiences might achieve paladin status after only 2 or 3 centuries of service. The paladins maintain their own traditions and rituals separate from the standard brotherhood structure, gathering periodically to share knowledge and discuss threats facing the chapter. These gatherings serve as advanced training sessions where paladins refine techniques and develop new approaches to combating demonic entities. The apothecaries of the Grey Knights bear responsibilities that extend beyond the medical care provided by apothecaries in other chapters. They monitor not just physical health but psychic well-being, watching for signs that a Grey Knight's mental defenses might be weakening or that exposure to demonic entities has created psychological damage. The apothecaries maintain the chapter's gene seed stocks, harvesting progenitor glands from fallen warriors and ensuring these precious genetic materials remain pure and uncorrupted. Given the gene seed's origin in the Emperor's own genetic template, any corruption would represent catastrophe beyond measure, potentially compromising the chapter's fundamental nature and creating vulnerabilities that demons could exploit. The gene seed harvesting process follows protocols more stringent than those used by any other chapter. When a Grey Knight falls, his body is recovered regardless of the tactical situation or the risks involved in retrieval. The apothecaries perform initial examinations in the field, checking for any signs of corruption before extracting the progenitor glands. These glands are then transported to Titan under conditions of absolute security, sealed in containers inscribed with wards and accompanied by armed escorts. Once on Titan, the gene seed undergoes extensive testing and purification rituals before being deemed suitable for implantation into new aspirants. The apothecaries maintain detailed genetic records tracking each line of gene seed through generations, monitoring for any mutations or deviations that might indicate problems requiring intervention. The prognosticars serve as the chapter's eyes into the future, using their psychic abilities and the Emperor's Tarot to identify demonic threats before they fully manifest. These specialized psychers possess talents for divination and precognition that exceed those of standard Grey Knights, their minds capable of perceiving patterns in the warp's currents that reveal where and when demon incursions are likely to occur. The prognosticars work in specially prepared chambers on Titan, surrounded by wards that protect them while they extend their consciousness into the Imperium to search for signs of demonic activity. The process is dangerous even with these protections, as the act of scrying the warp exposes the prognosticar to the attention of entities that would corrupt or destroy him if given opportunity. The Emperor's Tarot serves as the primary tool for prognosticar's divinations, though the deck used by the Grey Knights differs from standard Imperial Tarot in subtle but significant ways. The cards contain additional symbols and meanings known only to the chapter, allowing for more precise interpretations when seeking information about demonic threats. A prognosticar conducting a reading enters a trance state where his consciousness partially detaches from his physical body, allowing him to perceive connections and patterns invisible to normal awareness. The cards he draws during this state are not random, but are instead guided by his subconscious perception of warp currents, each card representing aspects of the threat he seeks to understand. Interpreting the readings requires years of training and experience, as the tarot speaks in symbols and metaphors that can mislead the unwary or inexperienced. The intelligence gathered by prognosticars flows to the Grand Masters and Brother Captains, who use it to determine deployment priorities and allocate Brotherhood resources. When a prognosticar identifies a significant threat, the relevant Brother Captain receives detailed briefings about what the divinations revealed, including probable demon types, likely manifestation locations, and estimated timeframes. This foreknowledge allows the Grey Knights to position forces in advance of demon incursions, arriving before the entities fully manifest and catching them at their most vulnerable. The prognosticars also coordinate extensively with the Ordo Malleus, sharing their findings with inquisitors who can investigate suspicious activity and confirm whether demonic involvement actually exists in situations where the divinations remain ambiguous. The Liber Daemonica exists not as a physical tome, but as a psychic construct, a repository of knowledge so dangerous that committing it to physical form would risk its corruption or theft by the very entities it describes. This accumulated wisdom represents 10,000 years of warfare against demonic incursions, compiled from battlefield observations, inquisitorial investigations, and information extracted from captured cultists and possessed individuals before their execution. Every Grey Knight carries portions of this knowledge imprinted directly into his consciousness through psychic encoding, the information layered into his mind during the decades-long transformation from aspirant to battle brother. The process creates a living library distributed across hundreds of warriors, each one containing fragments of the whole, while senior members of the chapter possess increasingly comprehensive sections as they advance through the ranks. The knowledge transfer begins during the earliest stages of training, when aspirants receive basic information about demon classification and behavior. These initial imprints focus on lesser entities, the foot soldiers of chaos that manifest most commonly during incursions. The aspirant learns to recognize bloodletters by their brass collars and hellblades, to identify the distinctive laughter of pink horrors before they split into blue and brimstone variants, to spot the seductive movements of demonettes that mark them as servants of the Prince of Pleasure. Each demon type comes with tactical data accumulated over millennia. Bloodletters favor direct charges and care nothing for self-preservation, making them vulnerable to concentrated fire before they close to melee range. Horrors rely on warp fire and should be engaged quickly before they can establish firing positions. Demonettes move with supernatural speed and require precise timing to intercept their attacks. As the aspirant progresses through training and demonstrates his ability to contain this information without psychological damage, he receives deeper knowledge about the hierarchies that organize demonic forces. The warp operates according to rules that defy conventional logic, but patterns exist within the apparent chaos. Lesser demons serve greater ones, bound by pacts and compulsions that reflect the nature of their patron gods. Bloodletters answer to bloodthirsters, the mightiest warriors of Khorne who lead demonic armies with tactical cunning that belies their god's reputation for mindless violence. Horrors serve lords of change, greater demons of Tzeentch, whose schemes span centuries, and whose manipulation of fate makes them among the most dangerous entities the Grey Knights face. Understanding these hierarchies allows Grey Knights to predict demon behavior during combat, to identify which entities coordinate attacks and which simply follow instinctive aggression. The most critical component of the Liber Daemonica consists of the 666 true names and words of power that give Grey Knights authority over demonic entities. These names represent absolute knowledge, the fundamental identities of specific demons that exist beyond the masks and forms they present to material beings. A demon can alter its appearance, can lie about its nature and purpose, can present itself as angel or monster according to what best serves its goals. Its true name, however, cannot be changed or hidden from those who possess the knowledge to perceive it. When a Grey Knight speaks a demon's true name, he asserts metaphysical authority over that entity, binding it through the power of absolute identification and forcing it to acknowledge his dominion. The true names are not words in any conventional sense. They exist as concepts that encompass the demon's entire nature, its relationship to its patron god, its history of manifestations in real space, and its position within the warp's incomprehensible geography. Speaking a true name requires the Grey Knight to hold this entire concept in his consciousness simultaneously, while channeling psychic power through specific mental patterns that give the name force and authority. The process demands absolute concentration and draws heavily on the Grey Knight's psychic reserves, making it impossible to use true names casually or repeatedly in rapid succession. A warrior who attempts to speak too many true names too quickly risks burning out his own mind, the strain of holding and projecting these concepts exceeding what even enhanced human consciousness can safely sustain. The 666 names encoded into every Grey Knight's memory represent the most commonly encountered demon entities, those that have manifested repeatedly throughout Imperial history and whose patterns of behavior are well documented. These include greater demons who have led major incursions, demon princes who retain fragments of their mortal identities, and unique entities whose power makes them persistent threats across millennia. A newly inducted Grey Knight knows perhaps a dozen of these names well enough to use them in combat, with the remainder existing as latent knowledge he can access through meditation and preparation. As he gains experience and his psychic abilities strengthen, he develops the capacity to hold more names in active memory and to speak them with greater authority and effect. Senior Grey Knights, particularly those who have achieved paladin status or command positions, possess knowledge extending beyond the standard 666 names. They learn the names of demon entities encountered less frequently, beings that serve specific purposes for their patron gods or that manifest only under particular circumstances. They study the relationships between names, understanding how certain demons serve others, and how speaking one name might provide leverage over entities bound to that demon through warp pacts. The most experienced warriors develop the ability to derive partial names through observation and psychic analysis, examining a previously unknown demon and determining enough of its true nature to exert some degree of control, even without complete knowledge. The words of power encoded alongside the true names serve different purposes, functioning as keys that unlock specific effects when spoken with proper psychic backing. Some words disrupt the flow of warp energy that sustains demonic manifestations, weakening entities and making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Others create barriers that demons cannot cross without expending tremendous energy, allowing Grey Knights to control battlefield geometry and force enemies into disadvantageous positions. Still others amplify the psychic abilities of nearby Grey Knights, creating resonance effects that multiply the effectiveness of coordinated attacks. Each word requires specific pronunciation that exists more in the psychic realm than in physical sound, with the Grey Knight's mental state and spiritual purity affecting how much power the word carries when spoken. The Liber Daemonica contains extensive documentation of banishment rituals, formalized procedures for severing demons' connections to real space and forcing them back into the warp. These rituals range from simple prayers that can be recited in seconds during combat to complex ceremonies requiring hours of preparation and the coordinated efforts of multiple Grey Knights. The simplest banishments work against lesser demons whose hold on reality remains tenuous, with a Grey Knight speaking words of dismissal while channeling psychic energy through his nemesis weapon. The demon's form destabilizes under this assault, its material manifestation dissolving as the energy binding it to real space dissipates. More powerful entities require more elaborate approaches, with Grey Knights forming geometric patterns around the target while reciting longer invocations that systematically deconstruct the demon's presence. The rite of exorcism represents one of the most commonly used banishment techniques, a flexible procedure that can be adapted to various demon types and circumstances. The ritual begins with a Grey Knight establishing psychic dominance over the target, using either the demon's true name, if known, or general words of authority that assert the Emperor's sovereignty over all reality. Once dominance is established, the Grey Knight recites specific phrases from the Liber Daemonica that describe the demon's nature and reject its right to exist in material space. Each phrase carries psychic weight, building pressure on the demon's manifestation and forcing it to expend energy maintaining its presence. The ritual continues with increasing intensity until the demon either flees voluntarily back into the warp or its manifestation collapses under the accumulated strain. The entire process might take minutes against a greater demon, with the Grey Knight maintaining absolute focus while under physical attack from the entity he seeks to banish. The Canticles of Absolution serve as battle prayers that Grey Knights recite during combat, their words providing both spiritual fortification and tactical advantage. These canticles were composed during the chapter's founding, their phrases carefully constructed to resonate with specific frequencies that disrupt demonic essence. A Grey Knight squad advancing into combat will often recite canticles in unison, their combined voices creating harmonics that cause physical pain to nearby demons. The entities experience the prayers as weapons, each word striking like a blow that weakens their manifestations and disrupts their ability to coordinate attacks. Different canticles target different aspects of demonic nature, with some focused on entities of specific chaos gods, while others work broadly against all warp spawn. The Canticle of Purgation specifically targets Nurgle's servants, its words describing purity and cleansing in terms that cause agony to entities whose nature revolves around decay and disease. Plaguebearers exposed to this canticle find their resilience failing, their normally tireless advance slowing as the prayer's power eats away at the corrupt energy sustaining them. Great Unclean Ones, massive greater demons that embody Nurgle's gifts, recoil from Grey Knights reciting this canticle, their jovial demeanors replaced by genuine distress as the words threaten their fundamental nature. The canticle requires careful pronunciation, with each syllable charged with psychic energy that gives the words power beyond their literal meaning. The Canticle of Sanctity functions as a general-purpose prayer effective against all demon types, though less specialized than canticles targeting specific entities. Its verses describe the Emperor's dominion over humanity and his rejection of all chaos powers, creating a field of psychic authority that extends from the reciting Grey Knights. Demons within this field find their abilities diminished, their attacks weakening, and their resistance to damage decreasing. The canticle also strengthens the resolve of any Imperial forces fighting alongside the Grey Knights, its words reminding them of their duty and providing spiritual armor against fear and despair. Entire Imperial Guard regiments have held against demon hordes they should have fled from, sustained by Grey Knights reciting the Canticle of Sanctity while fighting in their midst. Beyond combat applications, the Liber Daemonica contains procedures for investigating suspected demonic activity and identifying corruption before it manifests in open incursion. These investigative techniques draw heavily on knowledge accumulated by the Ordo Malleus, with Grey Knights trained to recognize subtle signs that indicate warp taint. They learn to identify architectural patterns that cultists unconsciously incorporate into their ritual spaces, to recognize behavioral changes in populations exposed to demonic influence, and to detect trace amounts of warp energy that linger after minor manifestations. This investigative knowledge allows Grey Knights to support Inquisitors conducting field operations, providing expertise that helps distinguish genuine demonic threats from mundane criminal activity or heretical movements unconnected to chaos. The security measures surrounding all this knowledge exist at multiple levels, each designed to prevent information from reaching those who lack the spiritual fortification to resist corruption. The most basic level involves the execution of cultists and possessed individuals after interrogation, ensuring that whatever knowledge they gained about demonic entities dies with them. The Grey Knights show no mercy in this regard, understanding that allowing corrupted individuals to live risks spreading the taint to others. Even cultists who claim repentance or beg for forgiveness receive only the Emperor's peace, a quick death that prevents their knowledge from endangering others. Imperial Guard regiments that fight alongside Grey Knights during major incursions face a different fate. These soldiers witness demons and see the Grey Knights combat them, gaining knowledge that the Imperium's authorities deem too dangerous for ordinary humans to retain. When the fighting ends and the demonic threat has been neutralized, Inquisitors attach to the operation coordinate with the Grey Knights to determine which witnesses can be safely released and which require mind wiping or execution. Soldiers who demonstrate strong faith and mental resilience might receive selective memory modification, psychic techniques that remove specific memories of demonic entities while leaving the rest of their experiences intact. These individuals remember fighting enemies, but cannot recall the true nature of what they faced, their minds filling gaps with rationalized explanations that avoid demonic truth. Others prove less resilient, their exposure to demonic entities creating psychological damage or spiritual taint that cannot be safely contained. These soldiers receive the Emperor's peace regardless of their service records or their protests, their deaths deemed necessary to prevent corruption from spreading. Entire regiments have been executed after particularly severe incursions, their 10,000 or more soldiers killed to maintain secrecy about what they witnessed. The Grey Knights do not perform these executions personally, leaving such tasks to inquisitorial personnel, but they accept the necessity without question. The knowledge they protect is worth any price, including the lives of loyal Imperial soldiers who served faithfully but learned too much. The mind-wiping procedures used on witnesses employ psychic techniques that carefully excise specific memories while minimizing damage to surrounding mental structures. A trained psyker, usually an inquisitor or a sanctioned psyker working under inquisitorial authority, enters a light trance and establishes psychic contact with the subject's mind. The psyker then identifies memories related to demonic encounters, recognizing them by their distinctive psychic signatures and the emotional trauma they typically carry. These memories are systematically dismantled, their components scattered, and their connections to other memories severed. The process causes temporary disorientation and sometimes permanent gaps in the subject's recollection, but it preserves their basic personality and allows them to continue serving the Imperium in other capacities. The Grey Knights themselves face the most stringent security measures, as their comprehensive knowledge of demonic entities makes them catastrophic security risks if they were ever to fall to corruption. Every Grey Knight undergoes regular psychological evaluation and psychic screening, with senior members of the chapter watching for any signs of spiritual weakness or mental deterioration. A Grey Knight who begins showing symptoms of corruption faces immediate investigation, his battle brothers examining every aspect of his recent activities and mental state to determine whether genuine taint exists or whether he simply suffers from combat fatigue or other mundane afflictions. If actual corruption is detected, the response is swift and absolute. The corrupted Grey Knight is executed immediately, his gene seed destroyed rather than harvested, and his name is struck from all chapter records as though he never existed. The First War for Armageddon stands as one of the Grey Knights' most significant engagements and one of their most controversial operations in terms of the aftermath that followed. In the 444th year of the 41st millennium, the demon Primarch Angron manifested on the hive world of Armageddon alongside 12 bloodthirsters and a vast horde of lesser demons and World Eater's Chaos Space Marines. The incursion represented one of the largest demonic invasions since the Horus Heresy, with Angron's presence alone threatening to tear the fabric of reality across the entire Armageddon system. The world's strategic importance as a major manufacturing center and its position along critical shipping lanes meant that its fall would have catastrophic consequences for Imperial supply lines throughout the sector. The Grey Knights responded with unprecedented force, deploying elements from multiple brotherhoods in what became the largest concentration of the chapter's strength since the founding. The Supreme Grand Master himself took command of the operation, coordinating with Inquisitor Lord Torquemada Codes and elements of the Space Wolves chapter who had been operating in the region. The Imperial Guard regiments defending Armageddon had fought desperately against the World Eaters, but found themselves completely unprepared for the demonic manifestations that accompanied the Chaos Space Marines. Entire companies broke and fled when confronted with bloodthirsters, their weapons proving useless against entities that shrugged off last cannon fire and crushed battle tanks with their bare hands. The Grey Knights teleported directly into the heaviest fighting, their Terminators materializing in the midst of demon hordes and immediately establishing psychic barriers that prevented further manifestations. The battle that followed lasted for weeks, with Grey Knight squads fighting through corrupted hive sectors to reach ritual sites where World Eater's sorcerers maintained the tiers in reality, allowing demons to continue pouring through. The fighting occurred in conditions that would have broken standard Space Marines, with reality itself becoming unstable in areas where the warp bled through most strongly. Gravity fluctuated wildly, time flowed at different rates in different locations, and the very geometry of the hive structures twisted into impossible configurations that defied rational navigation. The confrontation with Angron himself took place in the ruins of Hive Infernus, where the demon Primarch had established a throne of skulls and brass from which he directed his forces. The Supreme Grand Master led a force of 100 Grey Knights in Terminator armor directly against Angron, supported by Space Wolves led by Logan Grimnar. The battle proved catastrophic for the Grey Knights, with Angron's power far exceeding even their worst projections. The demon Primarch wielded a massive chain axe that burned with warp fire, each swing generating shockwaves that shattered ceramite and pulped flesh. His mere presence caused psychic feedback that left Grey Knights bleeding from their eyes and ears, their mental defenses straining to maintain coherence against the overwhelming hatred radiating from Khorne's chosen champion. 13 Grey Knights fell in the opening minutes of the engagement, their Terminator armor torn apart by Angron's attacks or by the bloodthirsters that fought alongside him. The Supreme Grand Master coordinated a complex psychic assault, with squads of Grey Knights forming geometric patterns around Angron while reciting banishment rituals. The demon Primarch laughed at their efforts, his connection to Khorne so strong that conventional banishment techniques failed to gain purchase on his manifestation. The Grey Knights adapted, shifting to a strategy of sustained attrition where they focused on destroying the bloodthirsters and cutting off the warp energy flowing to Angron through ritual sites scattered throughout the hive. The Space Wolves fought with characteristic ferocity, their warriors showing no fear of the demons despite lacking the Grey Knights' specialized training and equipment. Logan Grimnar himself engaged one of the bloodthirsters in single combat, his frost axe Morkai cleaving through demonic flesh, while his wolf guard created a perimeter that prevented lesser demons from interfering. The coordination between Grey Knights and Space Wolves proved effective despite the two chapters having minimal prior experience working together. The Space Wolves' aggressive tactics complemented the Grey Knights' methodical approach, with the Sons of Rust drawing demon attention, while Grey Knights positioned themselves for devastating psychic strikes. The final banishment of Angron required a sacrifice that the Grey Knights accepted without hesitation. The The Supreme Grand Master and his command squad formed a psychic crucible around the demon Primarch, channeling power directly from their own life force into a binding ritual that would force Angron back into the warp. The ritual took hours to complete, during which the Grey Knights had to maintain absolute concentration while under constant assault from both Angron and the remaining demons. One by one, members of the command squad fell as the strain exceeded what even their enhanced bodies could withstand. The Supreme Grand Master survived, but only barely, his psychic reserves completely exhausted and his body pushed to the edge of death. When Angron finally vanished back into the warp, taking his demon legions with him, the Grey Knights found themselves facing a different kind of problem. Hundreds of thousands of Imperial Guard soldiers had witnessed the demonic invasion and had seen the Grey Knights fighting entities that official Imperial doctrine claimed did not exist. The Space Wolves had fought alongside the Grey Knights and had seen everything, including the specialized equipment and techniques used against demons. Inquisitor Torquemada Codes declared that all witnesses required processing according to standard protocols for exposure to demonic entities, a pronouncement that meant execution or mind-wiping for virtually everyone who had participated in Armageddon's defense. The Grey Knights supported this decision without reservation, understanding that the knowledge these soldiers carried represented an unacceptable security risk. The process began immediately, with inquisitorial personnel establishing screening centers where Imperial Guard regiments were evaluated. Soldiers deemed sufficiently resilient underwent mind-wiping procedures that removed their memories of the demonic aspects of the invasion while leaving their recollections of fighting Chaos Space Marines intact. Those who showed signs of spiritual taint or whose exposure had been too extensive received the Emperor's Peace, executed by firing squad, and their bodies cremated to prevent any possibility of demonic influence surviving in their remains. The scale of the operation was staggering, with estimates suggesting that over 500,000 Imperial Guard soldiers were either executed or mind-wiped in the months following the invasion's end. The process created logistical nightmares as entire regiments disappeared from Imperial records, their service histories altered to show casualties during conventional combat rather than survival followed by execution. The civilian population of Armageddon posed an even greater challenge, as millions of hive dwellers had witnessed demonic manifestations. The Inquisition implemented mass mind-wiping programs, using sanctioned psychers to conduct group sessions where dozens of civilians at a time had their memories modified. The psychological toll proved severe, with many subjects suffering permanent mental damage or falling into catatonic states from which they never recovered. The Space Wolves reacted with fury to the treatment of Armageddon's defenders, particularly the execution of soldiers who had fought bravely and deserved honor rather than death. Logan Grimnar protested directly to the Inquisition, arguing that the Imperial Guard regiments had earned the right to remember their victory, and that executing loyal soldiers represented a betrayal of everything the Imperium claimed to stand for. His protests were dismissed, with inquisitorial authorities citing the absolute necessity of maintaining secrecy about demonic threats. The Grey Knights remained silent during these exchanges, their focus on operational security overriding any sympathy they might have felt for the condemned soldiers. The tension between the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights would eventually explode into open conflict during what became known as the Months of Shame, but the seeds of that confrontation were planted during the First War for Armageddon. The Space Wolves began hiding survivors from inquisitorial purges, smuggling soldiers off-world, and providing them with new identities that allowed them to continue serving the Imperium in other capacities. The Grey Knights discovered these activities through their intelligence network, but initially chose not to intervene, hoping the situation would resolve itself without requiring direct action against another Space Marine chapter. The Siege of Vrax demonstrated the Grey Knights' capabilities in protracted campaigns where demonic incursions occurred as complications within larger conflicts rather than as primary threats. The siege began as a rebellion by the planetary governor of Vrax Prime, who declared independence from the Imperium and fortified the world's extensive defensive networks. The Adeptus Munitorum responded by committing multiple Imperial Guard regiments to retake the world, beginning what everyone assumed would be a relatively straightforward, if costly, operation. The truth proved far more complex, as the rebellion had been orchestrated by a demon entity working through the governor and his inner circle. The demon's goal involved transforming Vrax into a permanent gateway between real space and the warp, using the massive casualties from the siege as sacrificial offerings to weaken the barriers between dimensions. The Inquisition detected demonic involvement several years into the siege, when reports began describing impossible events occurring within Vrax's defensive lines. Imperial Guard units reported facing enemies that appeared and disappeared without warning, weapons that fired ammunition that should not exist, and fortifications that changed configuration between attacks. An Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus investigated personally and confirmed extensive demonic corruption throughout the rebel forces. The Grey Knights received requests for support, but could only commit limited forces due to simultaneous operations across multiple sectors. A single brotherhood deployed to Vrax, tasked with identifying and destroying the ritual sites, maintaining the demonic presence, while the Imperial Guard continued their conventional siege operations. The Brotherhood's commander coordinated closely with the Inquisitor, using intelligence gathered from interrogated prisoners and psychic scrying to map the locations of corrupted areas within Vrax's hive cities and military installations. The Grey Knights conducted surgical strikes, teleporting directly into target locations to destroy ritual sites before the defenders could react. Each operation followed similar patterns, with Grey Knights materializing inside fortified positions, fighting through whatever forces defended the site, and then using sanctified explosives or psychic attacks to collapse the structures and sever the warp connections. The strikes proved effective but dangerous, as the demon coordinating Vrax's defense learned to anticipate Grey Knights' tactics and began preparing ambushes. One particularly costly engagement occurred when a Grey Knight squad teleported into what appeared to be a minor ritual site, but discovered they had walked into a trap. The site contained a bound Greater Demon that had been deliberately placed to lure Grey Knights into a kill zone. The demon broke free of its bindings the moment the Grey Knights materialized, attacking with fury amplified by months of imprisonment. The squad fought for 3 hours in a chamber barely 20 meters across, their Terminator armor providing the only thing keeping them alive against an enemy that could tear through ceramite with its claws. Reinforcements arrived before the demon could complete its slaughter, with additional squads teleporting in to support their trapped brothers. The combined force eventually banished the demon, but 5 Grey Knights died in the engagement, and several others suffered injuries severe enough to require extended recovery periods. The Brotherhood remained on Vrax for 8 years, conducting operations that gradually dismantled the demonic infrastructure supporting the rebellion. Their presence remained unknown to most Imperial Guard units participating in the siege, with only senior commanders and commissars aware that Space Marines were operating in the region. The Grey Knights' strikes created opportunities that conventional forces exploited, with rebel positions suddenly becoming vulnerable after Grey Knights destroyed the demonic entities coordinating their defenses. The siege finally ended when Grey Knights located and destroyed the primary ritual site in Vrax's capital hive, severing the demon's connection to real space and causing the entity's carefully constructed plans to collapse. The rebel forces, deprived of demonic support and coordination, fell to Imperial Guard assaults within months. The months of shame represented the Grey Knights' darkest hour in terms of relations with other Space Marine chapters, a conflict that pitted them against the Space Wolves over fundamental questions about duty, honor, and the price of secrecy. The situation began when Space Wolves' ships intercepted inquisitorial vessels transporting Armageddon survivors to processing centers where they would be mind wiped or executed. Logan Grimnar had decided that the Inquisition's purges had gone far enough, and that the Space Wolves would protect Imperial citizens who had fought bravely and deserved better than death or memory modification. The Space Wolves boarded the inquisitorial ships, killed the crews, and evacuated the survivors to hidden locations where the Inquisition could not reach them. The Inquisition responded by declaring the Space Wolves renegade and requesting Grey Knights' support in bringing them to compliance. The request placed the Grey Knights in an impossible position, as they understood the Space Wolves' objections and respected their desire to protect loyal Imperial citizens. However, the operational security concerns that drove the purges remained valid, and the Grey Knights could not allow their methods and capabilities to become common knowledge throughout the Imperium. After extensive deliberation among the Grand Masters, the chapter committed forces to support inquisitorial operations against the Space Wolves, a decision that would haunt them for centuries. The conflict began with skirmishes as Grey Knight strike cruisers intercepted Space Wolves vessels, attempting to move survivors between safe houses. These early engagements remained relatively bloodless, with both sides showing restraint and attempting to resolve situations through negotiation rather than violence. The Space Wolves argued that the survivors posed no threat and that the Inquisition's paranoia had crossed into madness. The Grey Knights countered that the Space Wolves lacked understanding of how demonic corruption operated and that even apparently loyal individuals could become vectors for chaos influence if they carried knowledge about demons. Neither side convinced the other, and tensions continued escalating as the Inquisition demanded more aggressive action. The situation deteriorated completely when an Inquisitor Lord ordered orbital bombardment of a Space Wolves fortress monastery suspected of harboring Armageddon survivors. The Grey Knights had not been informed of this decision and arrived to find the bombardment already underway. Logan Grimnar responded by declaring blood feud against the Inquisitor and everyone who supported him, including the Grey Knights who had failed to prevent the attack. Space Wolves fleets engaged Grey Knights ships in void battles that cost both sides significant casualties, with neither chapter willing to back down, despite the obvious futility of Space Marines killing Space Marines, while genuine threats to the Imperium went unchallenged. The conflict reached its peak when Logan Grimnar led a boarding action against the Grey Knight strike cruiser that served as the operations command ship. The Great Wolf and his retinue teleported directly onto the bridge, their goal to capture or kill the Grey Knight's commander and force an end to hostilities. The fighting that followed shocked both sides with its brutality, as Space Wolves and Grey Knights, who should have been brothers in arms, instead tried to kill each other in close-quarters combat. Logan Grimnar's Frost Axe clashed against Nemesis Force weapons. His Wolfguard fought Grey Knight's Terminators in corridors too narrow for proper maneuvering, and both sides took casualties that represented irreplaceable losses for their respective chapters. The months of shame finally ended through intervention by the Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy, both institutions recognizing that allowing two Space Marine chapters to fight each other served only the enemies of mankind. Negotiations produced a compromise where the Space Wolves would return most of the survivors they had hidden in exchange for guarantees that these individuals would receive mind-wiping rather than execution. The Grey Knights agreed to review their protocols regarding witnesses to demonic incursions, though in practice little changed about their fundamental approach to operational security. Logan Grimnar never forgave the Grey Knights or the Inquisition for what had occurred, and relations between the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights remained strained for centuries afterward. The 13th Black Crusade and the fall of Cadia represented the largest deployment of Grey Knights forces since the chapter's founding, with all 8 brotherhoods committing elements to defend against Abaddon's assault on the Cadian Gate. The Warmaster of Chaos had gathered forces unprecedented in scale, combining Chaos Space Marine warbands from all 9 traitor legions with demonic armies pledged by all 4 Chaos gods. Intelligence reports suggested that Abaddon intended not merely to break through Cadian defenses, but to shatter the pylons that had kept the Eye of Terror stable for 10,000 years, creating a permanent warp rift that would consume entire sectors. The Grey Knights recognized that this campaign represented exactly the threat they had been created to counter, a demonic invasion on a scale that could reshape the galaxy if not stopped. The Supreme Grand Master coordinated directly with the Lord Castellan of Cadia and with inquisitors from multiple ordos to establish defensive plans that would maximize the Grey Knights' effectiveness. Rather than concentrating their forces in single locations, the Grey Knights distributed their brotherhoods across multiple systems surrounding Cadia, positioning them to respond rapidly to demonic manifestations wherever they occurred. This deployment strategy reflected lessons learned over millennia of warfare, as experience had shown that demonic incursions during Black Crusades tended to occur simultaneously across wide areas rather than focusing on single objectives. The fighting began when Abaddon's fleets emerged from the Eye of Terror and immediately launched assaults on dozens of worlds throughout the Cadian sector. Demonic entities accompanied every Chaos Space Marine force, with greater demons leading armies of lesser entities in attacks coordinated to overwhelm Imperial defenses through sheer numbers. The Grey Knights teleported into the heaviest fighting, their Terminators materializing directly into demon hordes and creating zones of psychic stability that allowed Imperial Guard and other Space Marine forces to regroup and counterattack. The Brotherhood commanders coordinated their operations through psychic communion, sharing intelligence about demon movements and concentrations in real time despite being separated by light years of void. On Cadia itself, 2 full Brotherhoods deployed to defend the fortress world against the most concentrated demonic assaults the Imperium had faced since the Horus Heresy. Bloodthirsters led Khornate demon armies in direct assaults on the Cadian pylons, their goal to destroy these ancient structures and remove the barriers preventing the Eye of Terror from expanding. The Grey Knights fought desperate holding actions around each pylon, their psychic barriers reinforcing the ancient technology and preventing demons from approaching close enough to damage the structures. The fighting lasted for months, with Grey Knight squads rotating through combat zones as their psychic reserves depleted and required recovery time. The question of the Grey Knight's gene seed origin has persisted since the chapter's founding, whispered about in the highest circles of the Inquisition, and debated among the most senior members of the Adeptus Mechanicus who have clearance to know the chapter exists. The official position, maintained by the Grey Knights themselves, and supported by what fragmentary records survive from the Heresy era, states that their gene seed derives directly from the Emperor rather than from any Primarch. This claim carries profound implications that distinguish the Grey Knights from every other Space Marine chapter in existence. While the original legions drew their genetic heritage from the 20 Primarchs, beings created by the Emperor but still fundamentally separate from him, the Grey Knights allegedly carry the Emperor's own genetic template, making them the only Astartes who can truly claim to be the Emperor's sons in a literal biological sense. The evidence supporting this claim comes primarily from the chapter's demonstrated resistance to chaos corruption, a resistance that exceeds even the most faithful and well-trained Space Marines from other chapters. Throughout 10,000 years of warfare against demonic entities, fighting enemies whose mere presence corrupts and whose whispered promises have turned entire legions traitor, not a single Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos. This perfect record stands in stark contrast to the history of other chapters, where individual Marines or even entire companies have succumbed to corruption despite the best efforts of chaplains and librarians to maintain spiritual purity. The Grey Knight's immunity suggests something fundamentally different in their genetic makeup, a built-in protection that operates at the most basic biological level rather than relying solely on training and indoctrination. Some Inquisitors and Mechanicus genitors who have studied the limited samples of Grey Knights gene seed available for analysis propose alternative theories. One persistent hypothesis suggests that the gene seed actually derives from one of the lost Primarchs, the 2 whose records were expunged so thoroughly that even their numbers remain uncertain in Imperial documentation. This theory argues that one of these lost Primarchs possessed inherent resistance to chaos corruption, perhaps due to unique circumstances of his creation or early development, and that the Emperor preserved his gene seed specifically for the purpose of creating incorruptible warriors. The expungement of all records relating to this Primarch would explain why the Grey Knights' origins remain so thoroughly obscured, as acknowledging their connection to a lost Primarch would raise questions about why that Primarch's legion was destroyed or disbanded. Another theory, considered heretical by most who dare voice it, suggests that the gene seed represents a hybrid creation, combining genetic material from multiple sources. According to this hypothesis, Malkador and the Emperor took samples from several Primarchs known for their resistance to chaos, combined them with the Emperor's own genetic template, and through processes that bordered on the forbidden, created a composite gene seed that incorporated the strengths of multiple lineages while eliminating their weaknesses. This would explain certain physiological variations observed in Grey Knights that don't perfectly match what would be expected from pure Emperor-derived gene seed, as well as accounting for the chapter's universal psychic abilities, which exceed what standard Space Marine librarians typically manifest. The truth remains locked within the most secure vaults on Titan, known only to the Supreme Grand Master, and perhaps to the Emperor himself, silent and unchanging on the Golden Throne. The Grey Knights do not discuss their origins even among themselves, treating the question as irrelevant to their purpose. Whether their gene seed comes from the Emperor, from a lost Primarch, or from some other source matters less than the simple fact that it works, that it produces warriors capable of standing against demons without corruption. The chapter's apothecaries maintain the gene seed stocks with fanatical care, following protocols established at the founding, and never questioning the source of the genetic material they implant into aspirants. For the Grey Knights, faith in the Emperor and dedication to their mission supersede curiosity about their own origins. The moral complexities surrounding the Grey Knights' approach to secrecy have generated intense debate within the Inquisition, particularly among those inquisitors who have worked extensively with the chapter and witnessed firsthand the consequences of their absolute commitment to operational security. The purges following major demonic incursions, where thousands or even millions of Imperial citizens face execution or mind-wiping simply for witnessing events they could not avoid, trouble even hardened inquisitors who have spent lifetimes making difficult decisions in service to the Imperium. The fundamental question underlying these debates asks whether the knowledge of demons is truly so dangerous that it justifies killing loyal Imperial citizens who have committed no crime beyond surviving battles they did not choose to fight. The Grey Knight's position remains uncompromising and stems from 10,000 years of experience fighting entities whose very nature involves corruption through knowledge. They have seen how demon cults begin, how a single individual exposed to demonic truth can become the seed from which entire planetary populations fall to chaos. The process typically starts with curiosity, with survivors of demonic incursions asking questions about what they witnessed and seeking explanations for events that defy rational understanding. This curiosity leads them to forbidden texts, to whispered conversations with others who have seen similar things, and eventually to the attention of entities in the warp who respond to this seeking with offers of knowledge and power. The survivor who began as a loyal Imperial citizen, who fought bravely against demons and deserved commendation, becomes the vector through which new corruption enters the Imperium. The Grey Knights point to documented cases where this exact progression occurred, where individuals who survived demonic incursions and retained their memories later became cult leaders or willing hosts for demonic possession. One particularly tragic example involved an Imperial Guard colonel who had led his regiment with distinction during a demon invasion, personally killing dozens of lesser entities and holding critical defensive positions until Grey Knights arrived. The colonel survived the battle and evaded the subsequent purges through a combination of luck and the chaos of post-battle processing. 20 years later, that same colonel founded a chaos cult that corrupted an entire hive city, his teachings drawing directly from what he had witnessed during the invasion. By the time the Inquisition discovered and purged the cult, over 2 million people had been exposed to its doctrines, requiring mass executions and the complete abandonment of several hive sectors. The opposition within the Inquisition argues that such cases represent exceptions rather than rules, that most survivors of demonic incursions would live out their lives as loyal Imperial citizens if given the chance. They point out that the Imperium routinely trusts billions of citizens with knowledge of Xenos threats, of heretical movements, and of other dangers without assuming that this knowledge will inevitably lead to corruption. The distinction drawn between knowledge of Xenos and knowledge of demons seems arbitrary to these critics, who argue that properly administered mind-wiping procedures should suffice to remove dangerous memories while allowing survivors to continue serving the Imperium. The wholesale executions of Imperial Guard regiments and civilian populations represent waste on a scale the Imperium can ill afford, destroying military assets and productive populations that could contribute to humanity's survival. Some Inquisitors have attempted to implement alternative approaches to the witness problem, developing protocols that would allow for more selective purging based on individual assessment, rather than blanket elimination of everyone exposed to demonic entities. These protocols involve extensive psychological evaluation, testing subjects for signs of corruption or dangerous curiosity, while identifying those whose faith and mental resilience make them safe to release after memory modification. The Grey Knights have cooperated with these experimental programs in limited cases, providing expertise in detecting subtle signs of demonic taint that standard inquisitorial screening might miss. The results have been mixed, with some subjects successfully reintegrating into Imperial society, while others eventually manifested corruption despite passing all screening procedures. The debate intensified following the First War for Armageddon, where the scale of the purges and the conflict with the Space Wolves forced the Inquisition to confront questions it had previously avoided. The execution or mind-wiping of over 500,000 Imperial Guard soldiers, many of whom had fought with exemplary courage and deserved recognition rather than death, created practical problems beyond the moral considerations. The regiments involved had been among the Imperium's most experienced and effective fighting forces, their loss creating gaps in military deployments across multiple sectors. The resources required to process so many individuals strained inquisitorial capabilities for years, diverting personnel and assets from other critical missions. Some Inquisitors began questioning whether the security benefits justified these costs, whether the Grey Knights' absolute approach to secrecy had become counterproductive in an Imperium that faced existential threats on every front. The Grey Knights responded to these criticisms by pointing out that their methods had worked for 10,000 years, that the chapter's perfect record of zero corruption among its ranks and zero major security breaches resulting from witness testimony validated their approach. They acknowledged the costs, but argued that these costs remained infinitesimal compared to what would happen if knowledge of demons became widespread, and the Chaos Gods gained new avenues for corruption throughout the Imperium. The debate continues within the Inquisition's highest councils, with no resolution in sight and both sides maintaining positions backed by legitimate concerns and documented evidence. The relationship between the Grey Knights and the Inquisition represents one of the most complex and sometimes contradictory arrangements in the entire Imperial military structure. The chapter was created to serve as the chamber militant of the Ordo Malleus, the Inquisition's demon-hunting arm, and this relationship defines much of how the Grey Knights operate. Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus can request Grey Knights support for investigations and operations, gaining access to the Imperium's most specialized demon-hunting force. In practice, however, the relationship involves constant negotiation and occasional tension, as the Grey Knights maintain operational independence that sometimes conflicts with inquisitorial authority. The Grand Masters answer to no authority save the Emperor himself, a principle established at the chapter's founding and maintained despite periodic attempts by ambitious Inquisitors to assert greater control. When an Inquisitor requests Grey Knights support, the relevant Brother Captain or Grand Master evaluates the request based on the chapter's own intelligence and priorities. If the Grey Knights determine that the threat does not warrant their involvement or that their forces are needed elsewhere, they decline the request regardless of the Inquisitor's rank or insistence. This independence has created friction in cases where Inquisitors believed their operations required Grey Knight support but were refused, leading to accusations that the chapter places its own judgment above the Inquisition's authority. The tensions occasionally escalate beyond simple disagreements about resource allocation. The Grey Knights have, on multiple documented occasions, acted directly against other Imperial forces when they determined that security considerations demanded such action. The conflict with the Space Wolves during the Months of Shame represents the most dramatic example, but other incidents have occurred where Grey Knights fired on Imperial Navy vessels, detained or executed Imperial Guard commanders, or seized control of inquisitorial facilities. These actions typically stem from situations where the Grey Knights identified security breaches or corruption that other Imperial forces either missed or chose to ignore, but they create lasting resentment and damage relationships that the Imperium needs to function effectively. One particularly contentious incident occurred when Grey Knights intercepted an Inquisitor Lord who was transporting a bound demon for study purposes. The Inquisitor had obtained proper authorization from his Ordo Malleus superiors and was following established protocols for demon containment, but the Grey Knights determined that the risk of the demon escaping or corrupting its captors exceeded any potential intelligence value. The Grey Knights boarded the Inquisitor's ship, killed his entire retinue when they attempted to resist, and destroyed both the demon and all research materials relating to it. The Inquisitor survived, but was subjected to extensive interrogation and psychic examination before being released, an experience he described as more traumatic than any demon encounter. The incident created a formal complaint that reached the highest levels of the Inquisition, but no action was taken against the Grey Knights as their authority in matters relating to demonic threats superseded normal chains of command. The Grey Knights justify these extreme actions by pointing to their unique expertise and their responsibility to prevent demonic corruption regardless of where it appears. They argue that other Imperial institutions, including the Inquisition itself, lack the knowledge and training necessary to properly assess risks relating to demon entities. An Inquisitor might believe his containment protocols are adequate, but only the Grey Knights possess sufficient understanding of demonic nature to recognize vulnerabilities that could lead to catastrophic breaches. The chapter's perfect record of never suffering corruption or losing control of demon entities supports their claim to superior judgment in these matters, even when their actions seem high-handed or disrespectful of other Imperial authorities. The creation of the Great Rift during the 13th Black Crusade and the beginning of the Era Indomitus has fundamentally altered the strategic situation facing the Grey Knights, presenting challenges and opportunities that will define the chapter's operations for centuries to come. The massive warp storm that now splits the galaxy in two has created conditions where demonic incursions occur with far greater frequency than at any time since the Horus Heresy. Entire sectors on the wrong side of the rift have been cut off from Terra and the Astronomicon, their populations struggling to survive in regions where the barrier between real space and the warp has become dangerously thin. The Grey Knights find themselves stretched to their absolute limits, with every brotherhood deployed simultaneously and requests for support far exceeding the chapter's capacity to respond. The arrival of Primaris reinforcements from Belisarius Call's laboratories on Mars has provided the Grey Knights with new resources exactly when they needed them most. The Primaris Marines represent the culmination of 10,000 years of genetic research, incorporating improvements to the basic Astartes template that make these warriors larger, stronger, and more resilient than their predecessors. For the Grey Knights, the integration of Primaris technology has proceeded cautiously, as the chapter's unique gene seed and the specialized modifications required for demon hunting cannot simply be combined with Call's improvements without extensive testing and adaptation. The process has taken decades, with the chapter's apothecaries working alongside Mechanicus Genitors to develop protocols for creating Primaris Grey Knights who retain all the psychic abilities and corruption resistance that define the chapter. The first Primaris Grey Knights entered service during the early years of the Indomitus Crusade, deployed alongside their standard-sized brothers in operations across the Imperium Nihilus. These warriors have demonstrated capabilities that exceed even optimistic projections, their enhanced physiology proving particularly valuable in extended engagements where standard Grey Knights would require rest and recovery. The Primaris modifications include additional organs that improve stamina and resistance to physical trauma, allowing these warriors to fight for longer periods without degradation in performance. Their increased size provides greater strength for wielding the heaviest nemesis weapons, with Primaris Grey Knights regularly carrying demon hammers and greatswords that would challenge standard warriors. However, the integration has not proceeded without complications. Some senior Grey Knights have expressed concern that the Primaris modifications might affect the psychic abilities that form the core of the chapter's effectiveness against demons. Early reports suggested that Primaris Grey Knights manifested slightly different psychic signatures than standard warriors, raising questions about whether Call's genetic modifications had introduced unforeseen changes to how these warriors interact with the warp. Extensive testing has largely allayed these concerns, demonstrating that Primaris Grey Knights possess psychic abilities equivalent to their standard brothers, and that their resistance to corruption remains absolute. The different psychic signatures appear to result from the increased size and altered physiology, affecting how psychic energy flows through their bodies, rather than representing any fundamental change in their nature. The Grey Knights have also begun experimenting with new equipment designed specifically for Primaris warriors, including modified versions of their traditional wargear scaled up to accommodate larger frames. Primaris Grey Knights wear Aegis-patterned Terminator armor that incorporates design elements from both traditional Terminator suits and the newer Gravis armor used by Primaris forces in other chapters. These hybrid suits provide enhanced protection while maintaining the psychically conductive properties essential for channeling the wearer's power into force weapons and psychic attacks. The storm bolters carried by Primaris Grey Knights fire larger bolt rounds with improved penetration and explosive yields, making them more effective against the toughest demon entities, while retaining the psychic enhancement that distinguishes Grey Knight's ammunition from standard bolt rounds. The strategic situation in the era Indomitus has forced the Grey Knights to adapt their operational doctrine in ways that would have been unthinkable during earlier periods. The sheer number of demonic incursions occurring simultaneously across the galaxy means that the chapter cannot respond to every threat with the overwhelming force that characterized their operations in previous millennia. Brother captains now routinely deploy their brotherhoods in smaller formations spread across multiple systems, accepting greater risk to individual squads in exchange for broader coverage. This dispersed deployment model has led to higher casualty rates, as Grey Knight squads sometimes find themselves facing greater demons and demon princes without the support that would normally be available. The Grey Knights have also increased their cooperation with other Imperial forces, working more closely with standard Space Marine chapters, and even accepting joint operations where Grey Knights fight alongside warriors who lack their specialized training and equipment. This represents a significant shift from the chapter's traditional preference for operating independently or only with inquisitorial support. The necessity of the current situation has overridden concerns about operational security, as the alternative would be allowing demonic incursions to succeed due to insufficient Imperial response. The Grey Knights have developed new protocols for these joint operations, establishing procedures that allow them to work effectively with other forces while minimizing exposure of their specialized capabilities and techniques. The future of the Grey Knights remains uncertain in ways it has not been since the chapter's founding. The Great Rift shows no signs of closing, and the demonic incursions it enables continue to accelerate rather than diminishing. The chapter's recruitment and training processes cannot keep pace with casualties, meaning that every brotherhood operates significantly below full strength with no prospect of reaching optimal numbers in the foreseeable future. The integration of Primaris technology provides some relief, but even with these enhanced warriors, the Grey Knights find themselves fighting a defensive war, responding to threats rather than proactively hunting down demon entities before they can manifest. The Grand Masters have begun discussing strategies that would have been rejected as too risky in earlier eras, including proposals to expand the chapter beyond its traditional 8 brotherhoods, or to share limited aspects of their demon hunting knowledge with other Space Marine chapters who face similar threats. These discussions remain preliminary, as any changes to the chapter's fundamental structure or operational security protocols would require consensus among all 8 Grand Masters and approval from the Supreme Grand Master. The debates reflect the reality that the Grey Knights face challenges unprecedented in their 10,000-year history, challenges that may require unprecedented solutions. Despite these uncertainties and the immense pressures of the current strategic situation, the Grey Knights remain absolutely committed to their founding purpose. They continue to stand as humanity's ultimate defense against demonic corruption, warriors whose very existence represents the Emperor's rejection of chaos and his determination that humanity will never submit to the ruinous powers. Every Grey Knight understands that he serves as part of an unbroken chain stretching back to the chapter's founding during the Horus Heresy, that the oaths he swore connect him to the original 8 Grand Masters who first stood against the demon tide when the Imperium seemed on the verge of collapse. This sense of continuity and purpose sustains the chapter through its darkest moments, providing certainty that their sacrifices serve the Emperor's will and protect humanity from threats that would destroy it utterly if left unchecked. The Grey Knights will endure as long as demons threaten humanity, as long as the warp spawns entities that seek to corrupt and destroy the Imperium. They will continue to fight in shadows, their victories unrecorded and their sacrifices unremembered by those they protect. They will maintain their secrets regardless of cost, execute their duties regardless of opposition, and stand forever as the Emperor's hidden hand striking at the heart of chaos itself. In the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, the Grey Knights represent humanity's refusal to surrender to darkness, the certainty that no matter how terrible the demon, no matter how powerful the entity, the Emperor's chosen warriors will face it without fear and without corruption, fighting until either the demon is banished or the last Grey Knight falls. This is their purpose, their burden, and their eternal glory.